Have you ever just stopped and wondered how your mind takes this chaotic jumble of sights, sounds, and feelings and somehow turns it all into a coherent thought, or a story, or even just a simple sentence? Well, today we're going to pry open the mind's black box and take a look at the amazing cognitive toolkit that actually makes language happen.
So this is it. This is the big question that drives the entire field of cognitive linguistics. How do we get from raw perception, seeing something, feeling something, just experiencing the world, to this incredibly complex and structured system we call language? That's the puzzle we're here to piece together.
And here's our roadmap for how we're going to do it. First, we'll start at the very foundation, how our minds even create categories in the first place. Then, we'll build a bridge from there to understand abstract thought. We'll look through the lens of perception, check out the mental blueprints that frame our experiences, fire up the creative engine with something called conceptual blending, and finally, we'll get to the payoff, seeing how all this cognitive machinery actually shapes language itself.
Okay, first stop, the absolute foundation, thinking in categories. See, before we can even begin to talk about anything, our minds have to do something incredible. They have to sort the overwhelming chaos of reality into manageable, meaningful little groups.
For a long time, the classical view was king. The idea was that categories are like neat little boxes with super strict rules. To be a bird, you must have feathers and wings. Simple, right? All or nothing. But cognitive linguistics showed us that reality is, well, it's a lot messier. And that's where prototype theory comes in. Instead of rigid rules, we have a best example, a prototype. So for a bird, you might think of a robin. Then, other birds, like penguins or ostriches, are judged based on how similar they are to that prototype. And this is why categories have such fuzzy boundaries. I mean, think about it. When does a beanbag stop being a cushion and start being a chair? There's no clear line, right? Just a scale of chairness.
So, if these categories are so fuzzy, what holds them together? The philosopher Wittgenstein came up with this brilliant concept he called family resemblances. Just take the category game. Is there one single thing that all games share? Nope. Some have winners and losers. Some don't. Some use a board, some use a ball, some are just in your head. What connects them is this complex web of overlapping similarities, just like a family. You might have your dad's nose and your aunt's eyes, but there's no single feature that every single person in the family has. They're all just linked together chain by chain.
And on top of that, these categories live in a kind of hierarchy. Way up at the top, you have the super general, subordinate level, like animal. Way down at the bottom, you have the super specific, subordinate level, like Hereford, a specific breed of cattle. But right there in the middle is the sweet spot, the one our brains just love, the basic level. We don't say, look at that quadrupedal mammal. We say, look at that deer. That basic level is our cognitive default. It's usually the shortest word, and it gives us the most bang for our buck, the most information for the least mental effort.
Okay, so we've got a handle on how we categorize the physical world. But what about all the tricky stuff? Abstract ideas like time, or love, or arguments. How do our minds get a grip on those? Well, it turns out we build a bridge from the stuff we can already touch and see.
And the main tool we use to build that bridge is the conceptual metaphor. And listen, this is a total game changer. Metaphors aren't just fancy poetic language. They are a fundamental way that we think. We understand one concept, the abstract target, by mapping it onto a more concrete source. The most famous example is time is money. We don't just say we spend time, or waste time, or invest time. That's literally how we conceptualize it. It structures our thoughts and our actions around this abstract thing we call time.
Now, working right alongside metaphor is its cousin, conceptual metonymy. This is a different kind of mental shortcut. Instead of linking two totally different ideas, metonymy lets one thing stand in for another related thing within the same domain. It's a super efficient reference point. Like when someone says, he just bought a Ford. You're not talking about Henry Ford, right? You're using the producer, Ford, to stand in for the product, the car. It's just a faster way to get to the point.
So let's lock this in because the difference is really important. Metaphor builds a bridge between two different worlds based on some kind of similarity, like structuring an abstract argument like it's a physical building with a foundation. Metonymy, on the other hand, works inside a single world based on association, like when a place, the White House, stands for the institution and the people inside it. One is a link between domains, the other is a shortcut within one. All right, now let's zoom in a little bit on how we process things as they're happening. The thing is, our minds aren't just passive video cameras passively recording what's out there. No way.
They're more like active film directors, constantly imposing structure and deciding what's in focus for every scene we see.
The most basic principle here actually comes from Gestalt psychology, and it's called figure and ground. In any scene, your brain automatically picks out a figure that stands out against a background or ground. The figure is what grabs your attention. It's more memorable, it seems to have a shape, and it's usually the thing that's moving. In cognitive linguistics, we have our own names for this. The figure is the trajector, and the ground is the landmark.
And here's where it gets really cool, because our grammar actually reflects these cognitive choices. The subject of a sentence? That's typically the figure. Take a look at this action chain. You can say, I melted the ice with a blowtorch. Here, the agent, I, is the star of the show. Or you could shift focus. The blowtorch melted the ice. Now the instrument is the figure. Or you can even say, the ice melted, and now the patient, the thing being acted upon, is in focus. The actual event is identical in all three, but our choice of subject totally changes what part of the story we're highlighting.
So our minds are constantly categorizing and focusing. But here's the thing. We don't build our understanding of a situation from scratch every single time. That would be exhausting. Instead, we rely on these prepackaged mental blueprints to make sense of everything.
And that blueprint is called a frame. A frame is basically a cognitive model that holds all our background knowledge about a particular experience. For instance, the word buy only really makes sense if you activate a commercial transaction frame, which includes a seller, a buyer, a product, and money. It's a two-way street. The categories help define the frame, but the frame is also what activates the categories and gives them their rich meaning.
And what's so fascinating is how language lets us direct attention within these frames. We can use what's called windowing to zoom in on certain parts of the event. If I say the car sped through the tunnel, I'm putting a window on the middle part of the journey. The opposite is gapping, where we leave parts out, but we can still infer them. In that sentence, the start of the journey and the end are gapped, but we still know they happened. They're just in the background.
So far, we've mostly talked about how we use knowledge we already have. But what about creativity? How do we come up with genuinely new ideas? For that, we need to look at the very engine of our cognitive creativity.
And this is where conceptual blending theory comes in. It's this really dynamic process. You take at least two mental ingredients, let's say your concept of a house and your concept of a boat. Your mind then finds the common ground between them and projects selected pieces into a new blended space. And what pops out is an emergent concept, something that has properties of both, but is also entirely new, a houseboat. This is how we're able to compose completely new ideas all the time.
All right, let's bring this all home. Let's look at the payoff. How do all of these incredible cognitive processes, categorizing, using metaphors, framing, blending, how do they actually show up in the very design of language?
You know, for the longest time, the dominant idea in linguistics was that the link between a word and its meaning is totally arbitrary, that the word tree has nothing tree-like about it. But cognitive linguistics pushes back on that, and this quote gets at the heart of it. While the specific sounds might be random, the structure of language, well, that's often anything but arbitrary. It's very often shaped by the way we think.
This leads us right to the principle of iconicity, which is just a fancy way of saying the form of language mirrors its meaning. For example, there's iconic sequencing. The order of our sentences often follows the real-world order of events, like he came, he saw, he conquered. Makes sense, right? Then there's iconic proximity. Ideas that are mentally close get put close together linguistically, like how we attach prefixes and suffixes right to the word stem. And finally, iconic quantity. More form often means more meaning. You add an S to make a word plural, a little more form for a little more meaning.
And look, this isn't just theory for the sake of theory. These ideas have really powerful practical uses, especially in things like second language teaching. It tells us we should teach basic-level words like dog first before we get to animal or poodle. We can use metaphors as powerful tools to explain abstract concepts. We can finally make prepositions make sense by explaining them with figure-ground relationships. It basically gives us a cognitive blueprint for how to actually build language inside a learner's mind.
So, at the end of the day, we've seen that language isn't just a collection of labels we stick onto reality. It's this powerful, dynamic, cognitive toolkit that we use to categorize, to frame, and ultimately to construct our mental worlds. Which leaves us with one final thought to take away. If language really is a tool for building worlds, what kind of world is your language building?